I'm going to hit start recording,
I guess.
and I'm going to open up the issues.
We have issues?
We have one issue that was our agenda issue. Uh, 22nd of Jan. Okay. Um, the so the first item, it's not first on the list, but it's the item I want to get handle first because it's going to be no, we don't have any progress there. Is the game dev survey? Has anyone spoken to Erland about the game dev survey? Because I think the answer is
No.
no. Yeah.
Since last time I reached out to him, I haven't heard from him, so I'm not sure what's going on with him.
Okay. Eaten by sharks, maybe? I don't know. I also haven't heard
Frozen
from
out
him.
in the cold north, likely.
Yeah, frozen to death in the cold north. Alright, well, um,
I think it's been brought up before, but is there any way that we can get someone else to help him with it? Or if he can just pass what he's done so far to someone else?
I would also like that to happen. I think if the difficulty is contacting them at all, then that would, like, we can't ask them to hand over stuff if they don't even look at their emails or
Like,
messages and stuff.
I've seen him occasionally post. I think I saw him post somewhere, whether it was on Discord or on
He
in
posted
this.
an issue on GitHub with the framework, and then after that, I reached out to him, I think, because I was back in December, and then I never heard from him again. So,
The polymorph project?
yeah, that was the thing.
Okay. Is an implementation of the pipeline abstraction layer. Okay. Um, so we're going to call that a bust for now.
Because the survey was created like way back when, so who else was working on that? Because then maybe that person also has access to it. I'm not sure, because the original founders were Erland, I think Dimitri and Alex. So maybe one of those two has access.
Well, I definitely didn't participate in that.
Okay.
Although I may still have access. Where do I check though?
Let's see.
It was a Google form, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. So it was on the users discourse. They posted a link to a Google form. So I guess you'd check your Google Drive.
Okay.
Um, oh, this was posted in August. That's older ago than I thought.
Okay, so I found this survey, and what do we need from it? We need the results.
Yeah, do we have results?
No, I'm not seeing any access to the results. Sorry.
Oh well. Um,
I think the point is like if Erland isn't working towards publishing some kind of summary of the results or conclusions, then we'd sort of have to redo all of the work from scratch anyway, right? So if the results are included with the original Google Forms, then we'd have to derive the results from it, or like the filled in form at least if we have that, then we can just deduce the results again, I guess.
it looks like Carl Bergstrom wants to join, but it wasn't working on their phone. Um, Hopefully they can join in a bit. Um, so the next item was I guess, the Outlook working group uh, progress. I posted on Zulip saying, hey, can we put up the current Alec WG crate into the standard library so that it can use nightly only features? And then a lot of the people said, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. There are no features at all that's blocked on. And then a few messages later they said, by the way, we are blocked on this one thing. So I don't know. Anyway, um, being able to put template parameters on a thing in nightly with a default template parameter that gets applied in stable is being worked on. Um, the other day, they had like the first CI pass that actually completed successfully. And then Tim asked, does this mean that we can ship it soon? And Varkor said, closer, but still, like, we still have work to do. Even once it's in this passing state, there's additional things. But probably my guess would be in the next month or so, that could get into nightly, and then we could start using the Alec WG proposal in its full form with like templatized stuff and so forth. Um, and then people could be directed to gain more experience with testing it out, seeing what the limits of the designs are, and so forth. Um, I don't know if other people had additional things they wanted to say there in terms of allocator stuff.
I think for the time being, until that's done, at least they want to put the individual traits into nightly so people can start experimenting with the trait even before you're able to use those traits on box or string, etc.
Okay.
And there was actually a proposal on GitHub for that, and I think you're the only one who hasn't responded to that, Daniel. So you might want to have a look at your GitHub notifications.
Oh, oh. I went through them earlier today, I thought.
Okay, I'll send you a link afterwards then.
Yeah, I may not have looked at the right thing. Um, and then the only other thing on the item was a change to the charter. If people have proposals for how they would like the charter to be changed, um, for those of you who weren't here 2 weeks ago, it was the consensus at the time that not that being told to not directly create libraries and stuff felt restrictive to the point where we couldn't actually do anything in particular. So, I don't know. Uh, Alex seemed to want to have most of the discussion written down on an issue, but that's a little slower. If anyone has anything they want to just sort of say, and then we can write that down later, like thoughts about it. Or if no one cares anymore, then that's fine.
If I recall correctly, Carl was gonna write a proposal at least, and then based on there we could have the discussion because he was the one who was most prominent in having an opinion about changing the charter to be more free. But I don't think that that ever happened, right?
Yeah, I nominated Carl to do that, and
Okay.
then they did not end up having the time, it seems. Uh, so we could just wait for Carl to do that.
Um, yeah, because I guess in terms of like an open discussion, it would be better if we have clear discussion topics on what we want to change, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
So
going
like,
in circles.
what what would be the bullet points if we had to write down some bullet points?
So I think one of the main things was that we actually want to have crates that we'd implement ourselves, or crates that we'd say, okay, this seems like a very good crate to use for this particular purpose at this moment in time.
Okay.
And at the moment, the second is not possible because we can't have any opinionated remarks. Like we should not speak in favor of anything. And the other thing is that I think it specifically says that we don't output things that we sort of connect people towards the resources, and that we gather information about what's wrong as opposed to actually providing solutions. Off the top of my head.
All right. So crates we implement ourselves, create suggestions, and provide solutions over just gathering info. 3 bullet points, very clear. Um, do other
Yeah, and
people have things that they want to say? Kvark or Peter or Miss Gloreth or Philip?
Well, I still kind of feel that implementing solutions is best left to individuals or groups of individuals that want to work on the problem. And the work group could identify problems and write up like where things are, so that if someone wants to pick up a problem and try to work on it, then at least they're starting with some information about where things are. And potentially we could find people and match people that want to work on a certain thing with solving certain issues. I'm not sure that the work group is the ideal place to actually develop a new crate or maintain anything beyond like a trait or something like raw window handle.
I mean, we've had the issue tracker open for 6 months, and we've triaged a bunch of issues and said, "Hey, we have these problems." And mostly people haven't shown up to just magically solve the problems. So I'm not sure that at some point we really like you got to help yourself. If we have problems, we have to solve problems ourselves, I think, or at least start.
No, but there's no contradiction here. Like you can still sit down and write that library. It's just you are doing this not as a mission of a working group. You're doing this as individual that also participates in the working group. Like it doesn't forbid you from writing libraries.
Okay.
I mean,
Ex-
that's what raw window handle. That's how it happened, right? Like you said we need this, and then um, um,
Ospiel.
who wrote this? Aspial wrote this, right? Aspial was in the working group as well. That doesn't mean that he was forbidden to do it.
Okay. So it,
and I don't think that saying that okay the work group is going to do this magically makes it happen either, because if someone had the burning desire to do it, they would do it whether or not it was declared something that the work group was going to be responsible for.
that's a very good point.
I do think that there's, you know, like one thing the work group can do is pass information to the core team. It's something I kind of wanted to bring up at some point, was that a lot of these issues that we've triaged, they're language issues. These are the type of things that not just one individual can say, "Hey, let's all do this and make a decision for the way the language should go." That's something that has to be explored with consensus and get as many opinions as we can. And as a work group, we can signal boost, calls for people's opinions, and we can pass ideas around of like, is this a good proposal, or who does this need, who needs to see this to get it work done, and as a language feature. Those seem like really good things for a work group to do.
Okay. So yeah, I mentioned that to Nico Matsakis, who's on the I don't if you don't know the name, they're on the core team and the Lang team, and they're sort of the person I went to say, hey, if we needed to change the charter, what would be the process? And they're like, oh, do this and that. Um, but I mentioned also that like we actually haven't communicated with the greater Rust project at all, really, because we haven't had a point of contact. From the, he said, oh, that is a problem. We'll try and fix that too. So people are aware, and we will try and improve that situation at least. Um, I guess we could make a specific list of, like, if we go through the issues and say which of these are in a position where we could make any sort of proposal at all to, like, the Lang team, say, like, does this need an RFC or what? That'd be good. We could do that in the next 2 weeks, and I'll write that down as a agenda item for the next meeting.
This is something I've been meaning to bring up too, because I get like we want to actually do things and have an impact and not just talk about things. So I've been wanting to bring this up too. At some point, we need to build the bridge to take our ideas to a language team for some of this stuff. I've been kind of waiting to see the survey results because I feel like that should somewhat drive the direction of the work group. But at this point, like we can't wait forever for it. And if we don't have it fairly soon, if we don't know that we're going to receive it fairly soon, then we probably just need to go with our best idea of what we should do.
Yeah, I agree with Philip. Like some good points, and in terms of that, I also feel we might have to come up with a better structure of handling the issues because we have a lot of issues in the GitHub that are there and that have a bunch of information, but they're never moving anywhere, right? So maybe in that regard, we have to come up either with a different meeting structure where we always have issues in a certain phase and we work on the issues in that phase and then move it to the next phase. And like whenever there's an issue that comes up that um, has reached a point where we can move it between phases, where we always have a clear idea of what's happening with the issue and that there's a certain level of progress, no matter how slow the progress is. Then at least we're going from having ideas to conceptualizing that, right? And that's a thing that's lacking at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, um, what other groups have done is they basically, like, members of the group can nominate an issue to be discussed during the next meeting, and we could do a thing like that where, like, since we put up an issue for the meeting in advance of the meeting, you can just post links to other issues in that thread, and then we could talk about whatever is appropriate for that issue to try and push it forward and get it resolved.
That sounds like a good start. Um, in general, it might be a good idea to do an overall, like we mentioned last meeting, that we might have to improve our PR, post again on Reddit to get people our way and like what we're specifically doing. But I think we were waiting until we potentially change the charter to do that. Um, but just in general, for example, whenever I have to go to the meeting, I go to the Rust Gamedev GitHub IO, and then I click through to the GitHub, and then I know that there the Discord link. But potentially there is, say, 10 more people who would like to join, but don't have a clue of where to actually join this meeting, what time it's at. So maybe we can also just do a review of our public-facing resources and make sure that people at least stream into the right channels so that we can add them to the discussion. Because like Philip said, if we don't have the survey, then we can only base it off of the opinions that we've heard within these meetings and on our GitHub, and the more we get, the better, I guess.
Yeah, can we could probably, like, stick it in tiny URL or something like that that makes it much easier to share around without, like, a 30-digit hash value on the end. Um, and then publicize that we have these meetings. I-
The
Is it
the
just
this month
is
in game dev is potentially a good place If we can
Yeah,
have some more prominent listing of how to interact with the work group, then that could be helpful.
yeah, we should make that like a default section of the newsletter, like very prominently saying, "Hey, we have in-call meeting or call meetings at this time, and also please come to our issue tracker and stuff." That sounds good. Um, make
As far as I am concerned, you can add an action item for next time to try and improve like the communication to Outwork people, and then I will come up with proposals and people can respond, and then we can start implementing them after the next meeting to make sure more people reach us.
to do. Make contact the working group easier to do. Okay. Um, do we have other issues? It's only been half an hour.
So the one thing that I raised over the past 2 weeks was the all hands, and it seems like so far no one is able to attend from our team. So it would be good if we come up with a document that we discuss throughout these meetings. So I guess that's a good topic to discuss if we don't have anything else left to discuss, at least.
Yeah, could you refresh what the all hands is all about? Because I mean, I hear the term a whole lot, but I'm not super clear.
Okay.
It's just sort of Rust project conference, right?
Yeah, so it's a way for all the people who are participating in the core teams and the working groups, like the official working groups, to get together. I can post a link to the FAQ for the all hands.
Okay.
So basically, all or like the people who can attend, uh, who are part of the official working groups and the core teams can go there, and then they can discuss topics in person for once and meet the people behind the nicknames, etc. And just in the hopes of getting closer collaboration in person. So it's a 5-day event in Greece. And for the official members who are registered in the team, so I think Kvark, Ganimo, Daniel, Philip as well, they also sponsor, like if your company doesn't pay for it, they sponsor the flight ticket and they sponsor the hotel even an entry price. So if you can make it, then like the finances can be arranged, and it would be good, especially because we lack the bridge between our team and the other teams. It might be good if we meet some people in person, and we can make those bridges for the remainder of the year to like pass more of our proposals.
Yeah. Um, I heard that there was going to be teleconference meetings during the event as well. Is that correct? Do you know?
It said so in the email, yes. So that's what I was hoping for as well, because I'm changing jobs around that time, so I won't be able to make it in person. But I was hoping to still attend those meetings, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Flying to Greece is a little bit out of my way.
Hmm.
Yeah,
um.
that's the thing for me. It's like that's a big time commitment, and like I have other reasons to have to use vacation days. I get a decent amount of vacation, but like yeah,
Yeah, right.
it's difficult to make it that. If it was in the country for like 2 days, it'd be a lot more doable for me. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Um. So, besides whether or not we're going to the Rust All Hands, which it does sound like probably no one, what would we want to take to people at the Rust All Hands?
So that's why I made the tracking issue. And so far, like the one big thing is the ALEC trace, because we've been working together with the ALEC working group to get that in, because that's very important for us. And then Philip also mentioned the placement new, the branch prediction, and he proposed Repi's fast float, Embark's fast floats topic. So those four are listed at the moment. And hopefully, like what we could do is come up with a um, proposal, or at least a description of the problem and what could be potential solutions that we could somehow still have addressed at the conference or the all hands.
Yeah. So, um, I can speak to Nico if there's uh, a place for sort of arranging topics of discussion. I don't know if we
Mm-hmm.
have to arrange them ahead of time,
Yeah.
but I suspect that there's going to be a schedule, and so that we will want to put things into people's minds to fit them into the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the person who I got the email from you as well is Xampraki, if I recall correctly. So it might be good to ask her as well, so I can reach out to her on that issue as well, just so we're approaching it from two different angles.
Okay, good. Um, Kvark, you haven't been here in many weeks. Do you have anything that you want to discuss?
Not really. Sorry, I wasn't following closely with the group's work.
That's okay. Um, so do we have anything
I also
else?
on the topic of gathering issues for the Rust All Hands, I think that anything we could do to kind of push for outside opinions of like even outside the Rust community would be a wise thing to do.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like attracting non-Rust programmers to program in Rust?
Oh, I don't necessarily mean like evangelizing, so to speak. I don't like that word, but
Okay.
like there's a lot of people who would consider using something like Rust, and I would like to know what people like. What do they want from a new language? Like what's important to them? I mean, I know what's important to me, and I think we've got a good start. But having a more diverse set of opinions, like not necessarily people in the Rust community, like that's another perspective I think that's worth trying to capture.
I can tell you some of the points right now based on my communication with non-Rust folks if you want. But the biggest one is always the allocators issue. Like, to a C programmer, having this standard library that presumes this global allocator thing is disgusting and abhorrent, and they would just like they won't touch Rust until the allocators issue is fixed. Full stop. Um, so putting more energy in that area is good. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those things where like it requires very specialized knowledge of the Rust type system and the compiler internals to implement that type system. So it's not like something everyone can just help out on, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah, I think it would take a decent amount of legwork from us to try to pitch the question in a way that's someone not familiar with Rust can try to answer towards, and then for us to take the response and make it meaningful to people who are within the Rust community.
yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but
The
it's
goal for
probably
that,
worth trying.
sorry, the goal for that was the Rust Game Dev survey, right? That's like a subjective way, but trying to make it objective by gathering enough responses and then deducing a meaningful conclusion from that. And if that fails, I guess all we can do is approach as many people within the game dev industry and ask them like, okay, have you looked at Rust? And if so, like, why aren't you adopting it yet?
So here is a wild idea. Should we just like take the survey and run it again? Can we just hand it out and say like, this is the 2020 game dev survey. Fill it out again, even if you filled it out before, please. And then we will have our own data set, and then we could just do it once a year or whatever.
It seems a bit fishy if we did one last year, though. Just gonna ask like, where are the results from last year's? Like, why would I fill this again if nothing is being done with it?
That's true.
And then if you say, well, we sort of like lost contact with the person in charge of that, then they're just gonna be like, oh, this is a shit show.
I wouldn't be able to argue with that assessment.
Hmm. So that just raises, because Clark, you have access to the original Google Forms, but not to the results of that Google form?
Yeah, I don't remember getting any notification about like extra access other than whatever everyone else got.
Okay. Um, did you know Erland personally, or you also just knew him through
Only
online?
through the group. No.
Yeah.
How did you try to reach him?
I talk to him on Discord normally.
I
Um,
I had some luck writing personal messages on the discourse to him. Maybe that's something to try.
I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Uh, survey. Is this? Nope, that's not it. Here we go. All right. I got that open in a tab. I will write that out later. Um, yeah, besides the allocator issue, most people, I know some people have griped that Rust binaries don't feel sufficiently portable by default. Um, which means like on Windows, you have to set an extra option to make it not to make a compiled binary not uh, dynamically link to the Visual Studio runtime. But telling a person you have to flip a switch instead of having it be default doesn't seem like a big deal. Um,
Well, that's how C++ stuff get distributed
yeah, I
too.
mean, it's fine. But those are the allocator thing and like wanting a compiled binary to like just work and be portable, and like you can just send a person a binary in a zip file or just a plain binary with no zip file and have it goes. Those are the two main things I've heard that people want from all of their languages, but that's why they specifically are like, I can't use Rust, it doesn't support my case. Go does this, well, Go does the portability thing. And then like Nim has allocators and is, I guess, portable, and C, of course, and stuff like that.
So I guess the two things for me beyond, I've already put some issues in for the stuff that I think will need to get solved for a lot of people that are like professionals to move over into using Rust. But one is that like any way that Rust can't do something that C or C++ can, like even if someone wouldn't actually use it very often or at all, that's going to be like a mental barrier. That's a reason not to adopt Rust. So, and I think that there was someone working on. There was I saw some. I'm sorry to be vague, but I saw some stuff like a few months ago that made the point that Rust needs to achieve parity with C, And I would agree with that. That if Rust is going to be the language for the next 30 years, and if it's going to take up the mantle for C and C++, it needs to be a superset of what C and C++ can do.
Yeah, I think you're referring to Josh Triplett's proposed C parity working group, which
Yeah, that's it.
it got proposed like just before the December holiday season, and then most people did not do much programming work during the December holiday season. So there actually has not been particular progress on that. Um, I can assure you that I regularly bug Josh about, hey, when's that starting? And I will definitely tell the entire game dev working group whenever the C parity working group also starts if people would like to keep up to date on that.
So what would you say is still lacking at this point then for the parody?
So the first thing off the top of my head is bit fields, which are very rarely used in C but are there, and in the kind of low
Ooh,
level
bit
type
fields.
programming. Yeah, in the kind of low level programming where you currently have to write C because that's the only option. To make Rust
Oh,
also an option, you would also want to support these bit fields things. Yes, you can use the bit fields crate, but it's just not quite the same. A lot of people
oh,
don't want to pull in a
for
crate for these sorts of things. So they want it as they want bit fields as a language feature. Um, uh, Other things are, it tends to be like weird esoteric stuff, like the way that you specify things to the linker that you want your code to be sewn together when you have multiple crates being linked together. And um, I know, Peter, you could speak to this, that the raw lib crate kind, I forget what it is, but
the raw
basically,
dialib linking
yeah,
kind.
yeah. So this is a thing that C can do that Rust can't really do
No,
right now.
no, it's not a thing that C can do.
Oh, it's not.
It's something that C does not do, but that
Oh,
Rust, if it did, it would have a significant advantage over C for being able to
okay.
do.
So it's on the C plus more stuff group. Okay.
But it's definitely something that would make my life a lot easier.
I think it would make a lot of people's lives a lot
Well,
easier.
yeah, it would make
Um,
my life easier, and as a result, I'd be able to provide things which make other people's lives easier. And it
uh,
would just be a general
isn't
significant improvement.
isn't that the thing that would allow us to have a Windows Rust target that does not use MingW and does not require that you install 8 gigabytes of Visual Studio junk?
Yes, it would be completely pure Rust.
So that's neat, but apparently not something the C parity group would be doing. But I'm not
But
clear
it's
on
still
every
something we
single
need.
thing that C does that Rust doesn't. But most of
Now,
it
for
is
C
weird.
parity,
Yes.
we need things like uh, being able to specify multiple manifest inputs, for example, which you can do with MSVC linker, but given that we can't really specify linker arguments, we can't really do from the Rust side. Um, but that's useful. For example, if multiple crates all want to specify something in the manifest, currently it's kind of really a pain. But if you can merge manifests, then you can merge them all the things they want, and it'll just create one manifest for the program.
With just all the stuff merged together.
Yeah, it's a very handy feature.
Cool.
Um, and better support for resource files, I guess. We currently have to, the current crates for embedding resource files have to work by tricking Rust into passing it to the linker as if it was an import library.
Hmm. That that sounds very prone to breaking.
And it works pretty well. It's just kind of silly that we had to trick Rust into letting us do it that way.
I know that on the game building Rust for Game Boy Advance was recently slightly broken because of an accidental change in like link argument order or something. So the
Mm.
assembly shim used to boot the game and then call into Rust no longer always gets passed as the first thing, and so it doesn't get linked at the start of the binary, and then everything explodes.
Oh yeah,
And
that's fun.
yeah, it's just one of those weird nightly things that you get when you use
It's
nightly.
one of those things we need more control over. But at the same time, Rust doesn't want to give us more control over it because they're still having dreams of linker independent cross-platform whateverness. They just don't.
That doesn't sound practical to me.
It's not practical, and yet, but that is what so far has been the insistence for however long I've tried to do otherwise. They just don't seem to care about or the realities of linking, and it just takes forever to get anything done. You have to rely on hacks and linking externally and stuff to make things happen the way you need it.
Well, that doesn't exactly sound like a game dev working group problem, but that does sound like a
It is
problem.
something that affects games because, well, really it affects anyone who wants to use Rust to create production software because there's always things you need done in a certain way with the
Yeah.
linker and stuff for production software. And game dev would be interested because you need to create games to publish to users, and those are things you need to care about. Manifests and resource files and whatnot. Those matter for games, but it's just not something that Rust itself currently cares about, despite basically every piece of production software on Windows needing it.
Do they ship games
To,
on Windows? I haven't heard of that.
Does who ship games on Windows?
Just, I mean, do they sell games on Windows?
yeah, but
I'm pretty
to
sure
get
Windows is the largest platform for games.
to get back to the original issue of like what other topics do we need to resolve for more people in the game industry to start adopting Rust? Is there anything else apart from C parity?
Well, there's me in WinAPI, of course.
Hmm.
Gotta get WinAPI up to parity with the Windows SDK headers.
Um, let's see.
Looking for motivation or support, or
N-
both.
I
There's
no
sorry.
continue. You go first.
Oh, I was also thinking this might be a little bit tangential, but uh, well, it's hard to put myself outside the Rust community now. After I've only been in it for like nine months, but it's still hard to like think back to what it was when I didn't know anything about Rust. But if there was some sort of like introductory material, like a guide that just kind of almost an FAQ that just walks through like the first objection someone might say, well, we should we use a different language? Uh, the first one would be performance, which of course performance is fine for us, but like someone from the outside looking in may not be aware of that. I don't know. This may be a little bit off topic, but I
No,
don't know if there's
that's
a
that's
good
close to
single
what I
place I
was
could
going to
point to
say
someone.
also. Um, I was going to say that one of the problems that new people to Rust in general seem to have, which also would apply to new people to Rust game dev, is just a better explanation of breaking the object oriented mindset in terms of design, because a lot of uh, educational resources about how to do a game design in C sharp or C++ are going to say, oh, obviously you're going to have these class objects, and this is going to extend this, and you're going to have this big inheritance tree going on. and Rust doesn't do any of that. So the very first question is like, how do I replace my inheritance tree? Like, what's the new design pattern? And I think a lot of Rust programmers have like personally come to the conclusion of what you do slowly, but I'm not sure that we have written that down. And if we have written that down, then we need to publicize that information much prominently because I don't know where that would be. And I'm a mid-level expertise Rust user, so if I don't know, I wouldn't expect a beginner to know.
I don't know anything. I've been using Rust for how many years and I still have no idea how async works or anything.
Fairies and magic. No,
There's still so
actually,
much stuff I'm learning
um,
about Rust
to
all
be
the time.
serious, Without Boats gave a talk about how async works recently, and I believe it was put up on YouTube. Um, it's pretty neat. It's also pretty immature. I would definitely steer beginners away from async, for example, for probably 6 months or whatever.
Like I think another issue with a lot of the material like that you read on online that a beginner might run across is that, especially in game dev, is that some of it probably won't feel non-biased. Like a lot of the stuff that's written for Rust is by people that are very excited about Rust, and understandably, they think it's great and they point out lots of great things about it. A I would like to see a resource that doesn't sugarcoat it. Like there's, the question: can I just write the same code? Can I write my code the same way in Rust as C++? The answer to that is no, you can't, and that's shouldn't be for an article like this to be credible. It has to address that and not try to like not mention it or cover it up or hide it in some way. Like it has to admit the faults too, because there are faults.
Yeah. So is you said article. Would you think of this as being like a smaller resource or like a several pages of markdown MD book style thing, or like what do you think should be the scope here? Because that does sound like something that we could work on for like a week, or we could work on it for like 3 months or something, depending on how detailed we want to get.
And to me, it feels like a blog post, and it would
Okay,
be editorial. So it probably shouldn't be a work group thing, or at least like it could be done by people in the work group, but
right.
it doesn't necessarily have to be a product of the work group.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we wanted, because Alex has mentioned wanting to have a game engine architecture book. Game engine architecture is the name of a C++ book about game engine architecture. And Alex, one of the very first issues in the entire repo, posted like, "We need the Rust version of this," um, and then no one did anything with it.
The thing in though is it takes an insane amount of time to like cover the same ground as that would do.
Right.
And
It's one of those like never-ending task type things where we could just keep adding more sections and more sections to a giant pile of explanations of how to sort of mentally translate things.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I feel like Philip is saying is that we should sort of create a blog post about the state of Rust game dev and where it's at the moment and what you could achieve with it and what you can't achieve with it, and what is still necessary to get to like full adoption.
Yeah, I think part of that would inevitably mean like we'd have, because like I personally do not do Unity programming, but to make a good article that does a compare and contrast, we would want input from someone who like does make Unity projects, and they can say, as a Unity user, this is what I expect to be able to do, and then we take that list and say, okay, this is how you do each of those things in Rust, and this is if it's easier or harder and so forth. Do other people have game dev programming outside of Rust that would like to make those lists?
Well, I'm
For
definitely
me,
going to kind of think about it, and I usually work better to like let something kind of sit in the back of my head and percolate.
Yeah, sure, sure.
But I feel like I could write something that would just kind of like try to walk through. Because when I first saw Rust, I ran across it because it was the top most loved language in the Stack Overflow survey for 4 years, and that made me ask why. And so I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I was like, oh well, surely it can't be fast. And I found it is fast. And oh, surely it's not like static type. People don't like static type stuff, even though I like it. And I find out, oh, it is static type.
So
And
static it hurts.
yeah, and it's like I kept thinking, well, this is the problem with like it can't be adopted because of this or because of that. And I kept finding, well, actually that was addressed. And there are things that are not addressed that like the fast floats and placement new and branch prediction hints, and those are all things that I think are important. But like for me to get down the list of to where those are the three biggest problems, that means a lot of much bigger problems are actually in a good shape right now. But I think it would be good. I could write out like that series of questions that I had when I was coming to it, uh, and what I found, and like the goods and the bads of it.
Yeah. Um, if you write out that question list, like even if you don't feel comfortable providing all the answers, I'm sure other people can provide answers as well, and we could fill in the sections where you don't necessarily know what the best answer would be, because that probably touches a whole lot of areas of Rust.
It does, but it's pretty high level stuff.
Okay.
None of it gets too deep into the weeds.
And we could put it, if we finish it soon enough, we could put it in the this month in Rust Game Dev, or we could always put it in next month's Rust and Game Dev article.
And I guess maybe why I'm thinking about it is because I brought up that we want to be able to get opinions from people outside the Rust community, but opinions that are people like professionals. And I'm in the industry for like about 10 years, but I'd like to get other people's in industry opinion too. Um, and maybe something like this is a way that they can, like, I could ask some people on Twitter that I know personally that maybe they're not very familiar with Rust, but something like this gets them familiar enough so that they can point out the things that, like, they would have different questions than I might have had in my path of evaluating Rust as being good or not. To be pretty coarse about it.
yeah, maybe it might even be good to not specifically mention Rust, but say like, okay, if you were transitioning to another programming language that had guarantees about multi-threading and like the other safety guarantees that Rust provides, like what were things that should be present and doable within that language for you to be able to consider using it?
Asking it without it, finding a way to ask it without bringing up Rust in particular is a great idea, I think.
I think if you, like, I wouldn't even mention the threading guarantees initially, because if a person, if you ask a person what are the features of a new programming language that it would have to have for you to transition to it, and nobody says threading guarantees, then that means that threading just isn't an issue for them. And it's genuinely not an issue for a lot of people. And that's fine.
Or that they think it's so impossible to solve that they're going to be stuck forever worrying about threading issues.
Yeah.
And that they've accepted that that's a fact of life, which I think I certainly did for a long time.
Yeah, same for me. Until I actually started using Rust, I thought like, oh, that's not really necessary. I can work out the pointer, the memory management, and work out the threading by myself. Like I have good patterns for it. But then going from somewhere where you have good guidelines and good patterns for using it to a place where you don't need to worry about that anymore because the compiler gives those guarantees, it's like a world of difference.
Oh, it's like the 4 minute mile fact. Like people thought no one could run a 4 minute mile because people's hearts would physically explode if they did it. And then someone managed to do it, and then right after that, a whole bunch of people did it
Huh.
because they saw that it was definitely possible because someone actually did it. And for me, a language that totally solves threading was that. It's like, well, that can't be possible. Like that seems I can't imagine how that could be possible. And but now I see, okay, well, it is possible. And I think a lot of people would probably have been, in my shoes where, okay, 50 years of computer science hasn't figured this out yet. We're probably not going to figure this out in the next 10 years. But actually, no, it is figured out. Well, a solution is figured out now. But I wouldn't have known to ask for something like that because I would have thought that a new language, that's too much to ask. It needs to have like 20 years of R&D in the lab somewhere before we can get there.
I had the opposite experience coming to Rust. I didn't end up ever trying to do threading things until I did them in Haskell, and then I came from Haskell to Rust, and Rust is like a clunky, slow, brutish golem in terms of its threading abilities compared to what Haskell lets you do. And so I've always been like, this is just sort of how it works.
But Rust gives you that safety on top of a systems language with no garbage collector and stuff. So
Sure. I mean, it does many good things, but I'm just saying, like,
yes,
depending on your background, you might think, oh, well, of course you can just throw it in a pool and the pool does it and it's all handled for you.
yeah. There's if you're not coming from uh, thread unsafe languages like C or Java, then you don't really know what you're missing. Well, you don't really know what Rust is giving you because you're used to threads just being fine. But if you come from Java or C or wherever where thread safety is not really built into the language, then you'll appreciate it more
I
for
think
sure.
most most Rust game dev people probably come from C or C++ or C sharp. C sharp
Yeah,
doesn't get
I think
mentioned as
C
often.
sharp also is
Yeah.
similar in not having all those thread safety guarantees. So at least for game devs coming to Rust, I think thread safety is a big selling point. We need to like emphasize and show how cool it is.
Okay. Well, we started about 5 minutes after the hour, and it's 5 minutes after the hour again. So I guess this is the end of the meeting for this two
Aw.
weeks. Um, I'm gonna stop the recording. I can stay and chat more if people want.